there, my name is Juliana Brassfield, and for our 201A history course, what I had decided on my project proposal was how did the works in the Mayans of the pre-classical period compare to those of the Egyptians in the Old Kingdom, and what conventions do we notice into those people who are in roles of power, and through this research to create a visual artwork of my own, and to relate these conventions back into this piece. Looking over the similarities and crossovers that they have, we see that they have a lot of similar meanings within their hieroglyphs. As stated by Vasquez from the semi-odd composition of Mayan and Egyptian hieroglyphs, she mentions how there are similar meanings within their usage of flowers. Both of these flowers are found near areas of water where we have the Nile, or we have a form of like the river. For the Mayas, we had the water lily, and then for the Egyptians, we had the lotus flower. I tried to depict this down here. Unfortunately, it was weathered, so it is going to be a bit harder to see from this distance. I'll go ahead and put a little close-up footage so you can go ahead and take a little closer gander at it. Honestly, just so fascinating how these two areas, although completely separate from each other, have similar meanings for flowers in terms of giving life. They also had similarities within strong animals. If we go back to Davies and Gregory, Davies specifically the jaguar that he references in his article, and Gregory the power, the domain, the jaguar symbolism of the Olmec. This is passed down through history, where the Olmecs were originally the one who put meaning into like creating this powerful presence of the jaguar, and then the Mayas picking this up and also putting this into their culture, where they would depict themselves wearing the skins of the jaguar to show this power. So the Egyptians, they had the lion, in which the Old Kingdom passes down to the Assyrians. They'd hunt for sport, and they would go ahead and show that they are in roles of power because they are strong enough to conquer this mighty beast. Both have similar instances for strong animals, and I also showed this through having the symbols located at the top inscribed along the top of the relief. Now, going into how this relief is organized, I decided to go more towards the route of the Egyptians. Paralleling the hierarchical scale, I similarly made the crown of myself as to touching the top part, the frame of that register. And going into the crown, I did a mixture of one that is of feathers and one that is of that similar shape of that crown that you would see of the pharaohs, such as in Narmer's palette. So it gives that sense of royalty, but it also contains feathers because feather headdresses were really important or really elaborately done within the Maya culture. Words were seen as symbolic and heavily important. As stated in our textbook, they point out how the headdresses could be made up to multiple birds, and that some of them could be pricier depending on which bird it was directly from. I wanted to make sure these feathers were included specifically on the crown, one of the biggest things that are the telltale signs of royalty, because feathers or birds specifically, were important in either culture. Back to referencing Vasquez's article, she brings up the importance of the owl and how both of them represented wisdom on either side. Now, both cultures practiced traditions and had ceremonies to their gods. Specifically for the Mayas, they had, or believed they had, a responsibility every 260 days to placate the gods, or it would lead to the end of humanity, as stated on page 682 of our textbook. Now, one of these ceremonies that I decided to depict was bloodletting. Personally, I just thought it's really cool. Now, in terms of what I adorned myself in this relief was the huipil. The Mayan women were typically known to adorn themselves in this garment, and in order to convey that elite status of royalty, I also carved in multiple layers of jewelry. And if this was painted and colored, the jewelry would be jade for the jade rock, because it was very important and luxurious to them. Whereas on the other end, if we were going to turn to a different form of stone that was very valuable to the Egyptians, we would look towards the diorite. However, that wasn't really used or worn to convey a sense of elitism. Instead, we had the crown, or we had the kiln. And in order to convey these contrasting sense of royalty, I had to combine and mix the both. So I included a little belt in reference to the kiln worn by the pharaohs, and then I also added some drapery and folds so you can see that physical body underneath, since that was very important to the Egyptians. I actually began this project in an untraditional sense. I looked up my birthday and what gods had fallen beneath that day. I had started out with the Mayas and then connected it back to the Egyptians and then started it off in that way. Because if I was going to build myself as a person in power with both of these conventions, why not start with that idea of the divine of being blessed by the god to be rightfully ruler? And because the Mayas were so deeply connected to the flow of time, as directly stated on page 682 again in our textbook, I decided to start with there specifically. So when putting in August 12th, I got Huitzilopochtli, which was the sun god. This sun god was very important to them and would be symbolized through the hummingbird, yet again in reference back to bird imagery and how important birds were to their culture. Now, the sun god was also equally as important in Egyptian culture as well. In fact, if we move further out of the Old Kingdom and we go to Akhenaten, now he actually specifically renamed himself to say that he was divinely picked by Aten, the sun god. And not only was there one singular sun god, but we had it in multiple depictions. We had Aten, who had that disc and circular form, but we also had Ra, who was in the form of a falcon. Yet again, going back to bird imagery. And so this was such an important part of their cultures, and one that beautifully tied together in the sense of my birthday and the conventions and having to depict myself in both of these cultures, that I felt it fitting to go ahead and place the sun directly at the top of the piece and have it be the main god depicted as such. So if I were in these time periods somehow from both of these cultures, I would divinely pick myself to be under said sun gods, either Ra, Aten, or Huitzilopochtli. So I jumped from point to point, so at the end of this I will go ahead and insert a picture of my chaotic notes to get an understanding of all the information that I just spilled out right here. But I hope this was as informative to you as it was for me. I definitely had a lot of fun with this, and it again is so interesting to see how both cultures on either side of the world can get similar ideas, just taking away from what's around them. They didn't have this exchange between themselves on opposite sides of the world, but they had exchange between their cultures within each other, from the Olmecs to the Mayans, and from the pre-dynastic Egyptians to the Old Kingdom. We have this built upon ideas that somehow, from very far away, seem to parallel one another. Anyways, that is the end of my research project. Thank you for listening to my ramblings, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. And now we're done. Yay! It's hot outside. I get something to eat. Badoosh. Oh, there's hair. There's hair everywhere. Good evening. My name is Miliana Brasfield, and for our 201A art history class, for my research project, I decided to go ahead and take a look at the conventions of do my research projects. Nope. Whoa, look at that. Because on God, we'd still in her paper discussing the semiotic larger form of hierarchy. Touching the is
seconds in Mexico, it is said as we beat.
Of what did I say? Am I staring at the camera? This is the camera? I was not staring at the camera. I'm not going to re-record those. Damn it, why are these names so hard to pronounce? That's the right word.